Jai Jai Shri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Dvaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Okay, so we're up to Chapter 10, the trunk, branches and sub-branches of the Caitanya tree, and we're up to text number 29. Prabhura Atyanta Priya Pandita Ganga Dasa. Yanhara Smarane Haya Sava Bandhanasha. Prabhura Atyanta Priya Pandita Ganga Dasa. Yanhara Smarane Haya Sava Bandhanasha. Prabhura Anyanta Priya Pandita Ganga Dasa. Yanhara Smarane Haya Sava Bandhanasha. Prabhura of the Lord. Atyanta, very. Priya, dear. Pandita Gangadasa, Pandit Gangadas. Yanhara, who? Smarane, by remembering. Haya, it becomes. Sava Bandhanasha, freedom from all kinds of bondage. Translation. Pandita Gangadas was the 8th deer branch of the tree of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. One who remembers his activities attains freedom from all bondage. Okay. There is no purport to that, but there's quite a bit of information about this particular devotee, Pandit Gangadas. So, with your permission, I'll speak some words on Pandit Gangadas. And it says, one who remembers his activities attains freedom from all bondage. So hopefully we can attain freedom from bondage. So we'll start. So Pandit Gangadas. This is a nice section of the Chaitanya Charitamrita because it's going into the different branches and sub-branches that came from the preaching of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this section is looking at the devotees from Bengal and Orissa in particular. So some of them you may not be so familiar with, some you may be. So today we're looking at this particular devotee, Pandit Gangadas. So interesting personality. I was doing a bit of research into him myself because I wasn't so familiar with who he was. So this is what I came up with. Ramachandra's guru, Vashishta Muni, appeared in 2 expansions in Adi-lila as Gangadas Pandit and Sudashan. That's from the Gaura Ganodesha Tipika. Jagannatha and Gangadas Pandit were previously Devasa, who was so dear to the gopis in Madhuvan. In his Chaitanya Bhagavat, Vrindavan Das Thakur equates Gangadas Pandit with Krishna's guru. Anybody know who Krishna's guru is? Sandipani Muni. So non-different from Sandipani Muni according to Vrindavan Das Thakur. There was in Navadvipa a wonderful professor named Gangadas Pandit who resembled Krishna's guru Sandipani Muni. That's from the Chaitanya Bhagavat. In the Gaudiya Vaishnava Abhidhana, Haridas suggests that Ramachandra's guru Vashishta entered into Sandipani Muni during his Krishna Lila. Thus, these apparently conflicting statements can be true. In verse 52 of the Gaura Ganodeshtapika, Kavi Karnapurna identifies Keshava Bharati with Sandipani Muni. Yeah, so it's interesting that when Krishna appears in this world, he comes with his entourage, and the same with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that when he appears in the material world, he comes with his entourage, and these personalities are also personalities in Krishna's Leela as well. So when we read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we can find out who these personalities are in Chaitanya Leela, who are in Krishna Leela. So in this case, different acharyas are giving insights into who this Gangadas Pandit actually is. He's connected back to Krishna's Leela as well. And going back to Ramachandra's guru, Vashishta, as well. So Vashishta, who was Ramachandra's guru, became Sandipani Muni in Krishna Leela, and then came Gangadas Pandit and Caitanya Lila. So when before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared, Advaita Acharya was lamenting about the fallen condition of the material world. So he was praying very fervently for Lord Chaitanya to come into the material world, because he, in his thinking, that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the only person who could rectify and preach Krishna consciousness. So Advaita Acharya was offering tulsi leaves to a Shalagram Shila, and was offering very wonderful prayers for Lord Chaitanya to come into this world. And that's the main reason why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually came into the material world, because of his devotee offering pure devotional prayers to him, and that attracted the Lord to appear in this Kali Yuga. So prior to Lord Chaitanya taking birth, different devotees were actually appearing, were taking birth, getting ready for Lord Chaitanya's appearance. So Pandit Gangadas was one of these devotees who appeared in Nadia prior to the appearance of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So they were, what do they call it when you have a great personality who's coming, and then you have, is it the entourage who comes before? Like if the Queen's visiting, or if there's a person, an important person visiting, then they'll send in the entourage first to make sure everything's organised nicely. Just like when your spiritual master comes, sometimes you have to get things ready for the spiritual master. Like we had Caitanya Swami here recently. So Charanaravindra Prabhu did a wonderful job cleaning his quarters, and we had to get other items prepared for his internet connection. So all these things had to be done prior to the personality coming. So similarly with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna, that their entourage comes before them to get everything ready for their pastimes. So this is one of these special personalities, is Gangadas Pandit. So Chaitanya Bhagavat, texts 98 to 99, many other associates of the Lord remained hidden in Navadvip, taking birth there prior to him on his order. They included Chandrasekhar, Jagadish, Gopinath, Sriman Murari, Sri Garuda and Gangadas. So this is a picture here of Krishna and Balaram with their spiritual teacher, Sandapani Muni, who was their guru. So Sandapani Muni, non-different from Gangadas Pandit, so he's obviously a very important personality in Krishna's Leela. So does anyone know which year Lord Chaitanya took birth in? What was his birth year? 1486, yeah. So Lord Chaitanya appeared in 1486 during the lunar eclipse. So when he appeared, everybody was, because the lunar eclipse is considered very, very inauspicious. So in India, everybody will either stay inside or shuttle the temples down like we do here sometimes. We close the temple and everyone does kirtan to the deities. So similarly, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared, it was during this lunar eclipse. So a lot of the devotees were bathing in the Ganga and were chanting the names of the Lord, Hari, Hari. So when he appeared in this world, everyone was chanting the names of the Lord. So he became known as Nimai Pandit. So this is his Vidya Vilas Leela when he was younger. Jagannath Mishra, who's Lord Chaitanya's father, took little Nimai to Gangadas when the child expressed his desire to study with him. Gangadas lived in the neighbourhood known as Ganga Nagara. It is said that when Bhagirat brought down the Ganges, the goddess waited on the spot for the arrival of Gauranga Mahaprabhu. During the parakram of Navadvip Dham, the devotees sit down at a spot near the Yogipit temple to hear the glories of Gangadas's home, even though it is in fact situated in Samantadvip. Yeah, so Mayapur Dham is situated in 9 different islands. So this is one of the islands in Navadvip Dham. So when you go on parakram to Mayapur, you can actually visit all these personalities' houses or their temples. They're still actually there to this day. So it's quite nice because it feels like you're entering to Lord Chaitanya's pastimes when you go to places like Mayapur and Jagannath Puri, because there's a lot of these pastime places are still there today. The Gambhira in Jagannath Puri. In the Gambhira, which is where Lord Chaitanya was experiencing very deep states of ecstasy, they have a pair of his padukas, or you can see Prabhupada's wooden slippers there. So there's a pair of those that belong to Caitanya Mahaprabhu and the Gambhira, and they still worship them every day. So you can go there and take darshan of these padukas. And also Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's water pot is also there as well. So it helps, really connects you a lot deeper to these personalities when you can go to their places where they resided and you can see their paraphernalia as well. So I don't think Gangadas's home is still there, but the location is known where it was. So in his commentary to the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur writes, quote, Gaura Narayan is the Lord of Vaikuntha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is therefore the only reservoir of all scriptural knowledge, as well as the embodiment of the opulence of wisdom. Even so, it is his desire to accept human limitations during his incarnation, and thus he desired to learn grammar and other arts and sciences, just as Krishna did when he studied with Sandipani Muni. He did this to show that those who make a living as teachers should have genuine learning and not make a pretense of possessing knowledge. Yeah, so we read in the Krishna book all the different arts that Krishna and Balaram learned when they were studying with Sandipani Muni. So remember some of the skills he was learning? Anybody remember them if you read the Krishna book when he was studying under Sandipani Muni? Like he learned how to paint nicely. Remember, it was one of the things he could paint and sewing, like different crafts and arts like that. It wasn't just academic learning like maths and science, but it was also a lot of crafts as well. So as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati is saying there that it's not that the Lord needs to learn these things, but he desires to do that. That he accepts these somewhat external human limitations during his incarnation. Also to teach us as well, like when Krishna appears in this world, he's obviously setting an example because he says to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita that whatever actions a great person performs, the whole world follows. So Krishna understands that he also sets a nice example for people when he comes into the material world. Even though he's totally aloof and is not bound by the mundane laws of the material world, he'll still set a nice example for people to follow. So even Krishna went to school and he had teachers and gurus as well. When Jagannath Mishra brought Nimai to Gangadas, this is when he was aged from 8 to 10 years old, the scholar was overjoyed to accept him as his student. He began to teach him with as much care as if he were his own son. He was astounded by Nimai's powerful memory and his intelligence. Though he had taught thousands of students, he had never had a pupil of such calibre. A student of quality brings glory to his teacher. Nimai would ask trick questions of his fellow students, Murari Gupta, Krishnananda, Kamala Kanta and others. He was able to explain a sutra in one way and then in a completely different way, thus baffling his classmates who were nevertheless impressed by his scholarship. Thus the Lord's education pastimes took place in the home of Gangadas Pandit. It's an image there of Nimai Pandit with his classmates in Gangadas's house. It says that he would bewilder them because he would explain a sutra or like a Vedic aphorism, and then he would explain it in different ways. And he was so erudite and so learned that everyone was very impressed with his learning. That's why he became known as Nimai Pandit. And during this time he would also preach, well not preach, but he would debate with different academics and scholars, and he would defeat all of them as well. In the house of Gangadas Pandit, where the son of Sachi studied grammar, every day he took delight in his studying, even making his own explanatory comments on the sutras. With a twinkle in his eye, he would ask trickery questions of Murari Gupta, Krishnananda, Kamala Kanta and his classmates. Gaurasundara immersed himself completely in the joys of learning. Such pastimes are beyond the realm of the great gods themselves. So Lord Chaitanya studied grammar from Gangadas Pandit. After hearing a lesson just once, he would memorise both the sutra and its explanation. That's from the Chaitanya Caritamrita. So there's a pastime that took place between Nimai Pandit and his teacher in the Ganga. So once Nimai was requested by his teacher, Gangadas Pandit, to accompany him to the Ganges to bathe after the day at school. When they reached the banks of the Ganga, they offered their respects to her before entering her waters. Gangadas Pandit had heard that Nimai had taken a vow that he would never touch the waters of Ganga Devi with his feet, other than during his bath. Gangadas Pandit decided to test his vow. Nimai finished his bath and respectfully got out of the Ganga and dried off, and patiently waited for his teacher to finish. Gangadas Pandit, still within the water, turned to Nimai and asked him for some sesame seeds that he had brought with him for his worship of the Ganga. He had left those seeds on the bank and wanted to see how Nimai would give him the sesame seeds without touching his feet to the water. Without hesitation, Nimai picked up the tray and walked towards his teacher, who stood in the waters some distance from the bank. Gangadas Pandit's concentration and focus was solely on Nimai Pandit's feet, and Nimai understood his teacher's intentions. Just as Nimai's foot was about to touch the water, a lotus flower emerged from within the water and cradled the Lord's foot. As Nimai took another step, another lotus flower appeared beneath the Lord's other foot. Like this, Nimai Pandit walked all the way to his teacher and gave him the tray of sesame seeds and went back to the bank of the Ganges. Gangadas Pandit's suspicion that Nimai was no ordinary boy were thus confirmed. There's all sorts of famous pastimes with Lord Caitanya in the Ganga. It's explained there that he would only go in when he was bathing, otherwise he wouldn't go into the Ganga other than when he was taking his bath. But when he was bathing, he'd have a lot of fun in the water, like he'd swim under the water, and then the Brahmanas would be chanting their Gayatri mantras in the water, and then he would dip under the water and then pull on their feet and they'd fall backwards into the water. So he'd do all sorts of fun things while he was bathing in the Ganga. So some devotees say that the lotus flowers are in fact the lotus-like hands of Ganga Devi upholding the Lord's vow and taking the opportunity to hold his lotus feet once more. Okay, so this is further when Mahaprabhu, when he was Nimai Pandit, before he became Mahaprabhu, he went to Gaya and he was initiated by Ishvarapuri. That was his sannyas initiating guru in Gaya. So, Diksha Guru. Okay, this is Diksha Guru. Okay. So Ishvarapuri, because he was also a Mayavad as well, wasn't he? Madhavendra. Okay. Yeah, because I thought there was some criticism of him that he had taken sannyas from. He took Diksha from. Right. So he returned from Gaya back to Mayapur after taking initiation, and it's explained here that many people take sannyas, which is the renounced order of life, because they're frustrated with material life. But Lord Caitanya had the most perfect family, friends and loving associates. So Lord Caitanya, he had a beautiful wife, he was highly educated, and materially speaking, was very, very successful. He had everything materially you could want, a nice house, wives, friends and associates. However, Lord Caitanya took sannyas because he wanted to reach people who were distant and were offensive. As a sannyasi, everyone would respect him and he would be free to travel and preach. He wanted to deliver them because he loved them. The Lord loves every single living entity. So out of his compassion, Lord Caitanya took the sannyas order of life. So after Nimai's return from Gaya in 1509, all the Navadvip devotees, Srivas Pandit, Shriman Pandit, Gadadhar Pandit, Shadashiva, Suklambara Brahmachari were all amazed to see the transformation in his character. They also felt great joy to see how he had abandoned his attachment to his studies to turn to devotion to Krishna and preaching. Even so, Mahaprabhu continued to set an example of how to serve the spiritual master, going to Gangadas's house and paying obeisances to his feet. Gangadas also displayed the suitable behaviour of a guru for his dear disciple by embracing him with respect and affection. If one's education does not lead to devotion to Krishna, then it is certainly a waste of time. Through devotion to Krishna, one's ancestors, both on the father and mother's side, are delivered. Gangadas Pandit was also happy to see Nimai's transformation, but he told him to continue teaching. Nimai's Pandit's guru said, "Your life is blessed, my child. Your father and mother's forefathers have all been delivered. Neither you nor your students should open a book today, even if Brahma himself tells you to do so. You have now revealed yourself, so go home today, come back tomorrow. However, continue teaching. That's from the Chaitanya Bhagavatam. Nimai Pandit paid his obeisances to Ganga Das Pandit's feet, even though he himself was a lord of the Vedas and the husband of the goddess of learning as his disciples. What goals could be left for Ganga Das to achieve? His disciple is worshipable in the 14 worlds. There's a nice picture there of Lord Chaitanya after taking sannyas. So some more pastimes of Gangadas. So Gangadas at Shiva Sangam in the Mahaprakash Lila. So the Mahaprakash Lila is when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took on the mood of being the Ishvara, the controller, for 21 hours straight, and he's offering various benedictions and blessings to his different devotees. So Nityananda Prabhu, the saviour of the most fallen, also visited Gangadas Pandit's house one day after having been worshipped in Srivas Pandit's house, when he was wandering through Navadvip in the mood of a child playing with the boys of the town. On that day, Mahaprabhu sat on Vishnu's throne in the house of Srivas Pandit, displaying his effulgent form for 21 hours in the Mahaprakash Lila. He called all his devotees one by one to give them his blessings. On this occasion, he called Gangadas as well, reminding him of the following event from the past. One day, Gangadas had left his home with his wife and children due to fear of the Muslim rulers. He was standing by the banks of the Ganges with his family, waiting for a ferry to come to take them across the river, but no one came. This was causing him no small amount of anxiety. But even after waiting almost the whole night, no ferry docked at the quay. He began to cry in the fear that the Muslims would touch his family members and contaminate them. He thought that he would have to drown himself in the Ganges if this should happen. At that very moment, Mahaprabhu himself took the form of a ferryman and arrived at the riverbank. Gangadas was so glad to see him that he said, "Oh brother, please save me this time. My caste, my life, my wealth and my body are all dependent on you. Help me by taking my family and me across the river. I will give you a silver coin and a pair of new garments." The Lord then took them on board and across the river, after which he returned to his abode in Vaikuntha. When Gangadas heard the Lord recount this event, which only he had known, he fainted in ecstasy. So it's a famous pastime that's elaborated further in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, this Mahaprakash Lila, when the Lord was reciprocating in such loving ways with all of his dear devotees at the time. So Gangadas was given shelter, special mercy by the Lord himself in this instance here, when he was fearing for him and his family's life from the Muslims at the time. So yeah, very, very dear to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he also spent, Gangadas Pandit also spent time in Jagannath Puri. After the Lord took sannyasa Katwa, he took sannyasa Katwa. So he was initiated in Gaya and took sannyas in Katwa. He gave him sannyas, right. So he took sannyas in Katwa. I think Indradyumna Swami took a pilgrimage there recently to Katwa, to this place where Lord Chaitanya took sannyas. So after he had taken sannyasa Katwa, Nityananda Prabhu tricked him into going to Shantipur to Advaita Acharya's house. Gangadas came there with the rest of the Navadvip devotees to see him. He was also one of the first Bengali devotees to go to Puri to see the Lord there. The first time the devotees went there, the Lord was in Alalanath due to his feelings of separation from Jagannath, who cannot be seen for a period following the Snan Yatra. The Lord returned to Puri to meet the Bengali devotees. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya pointed out these devotees to King Patra Parudra, naming them one by one, including Gangadas. When the Lord met Gangadas on that occasion, he praised him to the arisen devotees and embraced him respectfully. Gangadas also participated in the kirtan before the Jagannath cart as a member of the chorus in the second kirtan group. Srivas Pandit was the lead singer in this group and Nityananda the chief dancer. Haridas Thakur, Sriman Pandit, Subhananda, Sri Ram Pandit were some of the others in the same group. So that's from the Caitanya Caritamrita. So I think that was everything I'd read into about Gangadas Pandit. I don't know if anybody else knows any other pastimes with this particular person at all. Yeah, because in this section of the Caitanya Caritamrita, it's going to run through a whole lot of different devotees. So when we have these classes, you'll be hearing a lot more about them. So we can obviously pray to these personalities as well for their mercy. I'm not sure if there's a samadhi of Gangadas Pandit in Mayapur, because a lot of these personalities, they have their samadhis or pushpa samadhis when you go to these holy places, so you can pray to these personalities for their mercy. And as I was explaining in the verse today, that by hearing about this particular personality, then one who remembers his activities attains freedom from all bondage. So we can meditate on the pastimes of these personalities and also pray to them for their special mercy as well. I'll read more specifically the actual pastime from this Mahaprakash Lila from the Caitanya Caritamrita, because there's a bit more detail given in the Caitanya Caritamrita about this pastime. So this is text 109. This is Lord Chaitanya when he's manifesting this Mahaprakash Bhav. The Lord turned to Gangadas and said, "Do you remember how one night you were running away in fear of the king? You came to the boat ghat with your entire family, but you feared calamity when no boat could be found. When you could not get a boat throughout the entire night, you became distressed and began to cry. Fearing that the Yavanas would mistreat your family, you resolved to enter the Ganga. At that time, I crossed the Ganga and came before you as a boatman in a ferry. You were pleased to see the boat and began to speak to me with great affection. Oh brother, please save me this time. My caste, life, wealth and body all belong to you. Protect me, take me and my family across the river. I will pay you the 1 coin and give you 2 coins as a donation." Thereafter, I took you and your family across the river and then returned to Vaikuntha. On hearing these words, Gangadas floated in an ocean of bliss. Such are the pastimes of Lord Gaurasundara. After hearing this, Gangadas fell unconscious to the ground. In this way, the Lord honestly narrated the activities of his devotees. While narrating the previous activities of Gangadas Pandit that were unknown to all, the Lord said, "When you felt great danger because of not finding a boat on the bank of the Ganges to escape the harassment of the Yavana king, at that time I assumed the form of a boatman and took you across the Ganges. No one except you knows about this, but I know." On hearing this, Gangadas rolled on the ground and lost consciousness. The conditioned souls are devoid of the quality of omniscience. Since the Supreme Lord is the controller of Maya, there is nothing unknown to him or beyond his knowledge. Yeah, so we can see how dear these associates are to Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. There's so many instances where Krishna has come himself, or the Lord has come in one of his incarnations to protect his devotees. And we can even see that Lord Krishna himself took on the role of being a charioteer for Arjuna. And usually a charioteer, the position isn't considered such a high exalted post to be in, but Lord Krishna, to serve his devotees, will take on these different roles. So the same with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, took on the form of a boatman so he could protect and save the anxiety that this devotee Gangadas Pandit was experiencing. So I don't think we should necessarily think that this protection is only exclusively given just to the most intimate of Lord Chaitanya's associates, that Lord Chaitanya is also protecting us as well, even in the neophyte beginning stages of Krishna consciousness. This shelter is given to all of the devotees. So at all stages of our Krishna consciousness, that shelter and protection is there. And it's quite natural that a devotee should feel that way. I remember Prabhupada gave an example that it's natural for a child to feel the shelter of the parents, of the mother and father when a child is upset. You can probably see it sometimes out here when a child falls over or hurts themselves and they're crying. It's like, oh, mummy, oh. Where's mummy? It's the first thing they do is call out to mum or dad and go to them for shelter. So we should feel the same way too, that we should feel that same shelter and protection from the Lord, that whatever anxieties or disturbances that we're going through, that Krishna knows it, like it says here, that he's omniscient, he knows what we're all going through, he knows our anxieties, he knows our fears, knows all these things. He's in our heart as a super soul. So it's natural that we should feel this shelter and protection from the Lord, and should be praying and asking for this shelter and protection as well. And the Lord likes to reciprocate. He explains that in the Bhagavad Gita. That's why he primarily comes into the material world for, is Vinasha Chaduskrita, is to annihilate the miscreants and also to enliven his devotees. And that's actually the primary reason why Krishna himself comes into the material world, is to enliven and reciprocate with the affection and love of his devotees. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came in the mood of a devotee, so he could experience the feelings and that rasa and the taste of what it's like to be a devotee. So Krishna himself isn't able to experience that because he's the supreme, but he has to come in the form of his own devotee so he can experience that taste, that rasa of what it's like to be a devotee. So it's a very exalted position to be in as a devotee of Lord Krishna, a devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So I think that's everything I was going to speak on today. Just finished a little bit earlier, but I don't know if anybody has any questions or points that they'd like to make or address at all.
With your permission, maybe just double clarify those points in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You met the Gaya, you met again Ishwarapur.
Yeah.
So Ishwarapur is not an because you said Madhavina.
Yeah, sorry, it was his sannyas initiating was.
So
yeah.
Ishwarapur is a great exalted
Yeah.
disciple of the
Right.
Victorian, and then from that moment he went there for the proper Peter, his father passed away in the guy for what's it called? Peter or for the passed away.
To the
His father passed away.
yeah.
So there's and it was also a crucial time because he went from his, like we were talking about his Vidya pastimes. And then when you received initiations from Ishwarapur, you received the Maha Mantra, and it was changed, and then came back, and then the Sankirtan pastimes began at that point. So, and sannyas is quite a bit later on.
And he went to Katwa.
Katwa, Keshav Bharati. Keshav Bharati came in the line of Mayadeva sannyasi. He was actually a Vaishnava also, outside as well, and also Chaitanya Mahaprabhu whispered the sannyas mantra to his ear first. And actually, translated on the trip by the Lord, you could say, so to confirm, is this the correct mantra? And we whispered the mantra, sannyas mantra, which is the Vaishnava mantra, into Keshav Bharati's ears, and Keshav Bharati, yes, this is the correct mantra. And so we actually initiated him first. Initiation.
And all the devotees were lamenting because he shaved up all his beautiful hair.
And Samadhi there, a couple was sitting to the hair, and I was still living to, and a very wonderful photo of devotees there. So, it's all up the street myself. I just wanted to say that just one except two gurus and two places.
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to ask, you know how sometimes what you were saying that, you know, the Lord is always protecting us and protecting his devotees, and it's just more for other people to, like, they have these questions of like, okay, so if he's always protecting us, how come we get into difficulties or we get, or some devotees, you know, like get cancer or they die. So some people would have, like, a lot of people out there, they're like, oh, he was such a nice person, why did this happen to that person? You know, like things like that, like it always goes through their mind, you know, like, why is this happening? Why is that happening to me when I'm doing this so good or I'm doing so well? So I've heard also that Krishna doesn't always protect your body, but he's always there. Like you know, it's just like it's not that he's always there with you, no matter what. But there are certain situations that the body is just not protected for that time. So if you could please explain why these things happen. You know, how.
Yes, I mean, different ways of answering that. Like, just what came to mind was like the Pandavas and Queen Kunti, you know, the famous prayers by Queen Kunti, who's praying for calamities to come again and again and again and again, because when they do come, it helps us to remember and become more reliant and dependent on Krishna. So, yeah, sometimes those things can be a test. Like when we're having difficulties, then, you know, it can be a test of what we're taking shelter of. Are we just taking shelter of Krishna and the internal potency, or are we taking shelter of our own material sources of shelter, whatever it may be, money and wealth and opulence and family and these sort of things? So that can be a test as well. And we can see with the Pandavas that they went through all sorts of horrific things. They were poisoned, their house was burnt down, their wife was stolen, and like so many things happened. So you may think, well, they're pure devotees, so, you know, how could such a thing happen? But we can see it's so the devotee will become more and more dependent on the Lord, because ultimately we have to give up the body at some point in time. So internally we've got to develop that strong attachment and shelter of the Lord, of Krishna. So it's not just about the externals, obviously, about, you know, externally going about, but Krishna consciousness is a lot about our internal development and developing that internal attachment for the Lord. So sometimes it's said that I was reading recently in one purport how sometimes things can't be appreciated if they're not in the right environment. So the example was given as like the light of a candle can't always be appreciated during the daytime. So at night time it's more appreciated because you can see the flame and the light much clearer in that environment. So similarly, the environment has to be right for us to accept and appreciate Krishna. So sometimes he can orchestrate different things to take place so we can develop more attachment and dependence and more appreciation of him as well. Because we can see that you know, when things are, materially speaking, going very, very nicely, and the sun's shining and, you know, the birds are chirping, the weather's nice and the surf's rolling at the beach, then, you know, that dependency on the Lord just isn't going to be there. So sometimes Krishna has to shake the rug in our own lives or collectively, so people, you know, will become more dependent on Krishna's mercy that way. So Krishna has to create the right environment sometimes for us to become appreciative of his mercy as well. So, I don't know. What would you say, Krishna Caritamrita, Prabhu? Saranya Mataji? Do you want to use the mic?
There's two gurus, one that road accident and one in COVID. But it doesn't mean he wasn't protecting them at the last minute. Where were their thoughts? As you say, the text. Did they not go on? Did they not go to the next planet? Actually, after Krishna Maharaj said in one of his called out to Krishna or to Prabhupada, why are you taking a best man? And I was to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada replied, I've got more work. Oh no, he saw Tamal Krishna Maharaj asking Prabhupada, I've got so many people dependent on me, I can't leave you, why are you taking me up? He said, I've got more important work for you to do elsewhere. Still in the material world, but a pure devotee doesn't desire to get out of the material world as much as to be connection 100% devotional service. So what point did I make? So even if we are taken by cancer or COVID or whatever, as the Buddha said, if it's a test, so you've got to remember Krishna at that point in time. We practiced, not just remember at that point, because when we practice, how are we going to remember the desperate, really desperate state, half conscious and half he will take care of us.
Yeah, I think the point with devotees, like you said, Sarani Mataji, it's about attachment to service actually. So a devotee doesn't mind if they're in the material world or in the transcendent world, the things are attached to our service. So we have service we can do in this body, and we're no longer in this body, the service will continue on in another form. So the main thing is attachment to service. Because when it says going back home, back to Godhead, it means fixed in our constitutional position, which means devotional service. So we're in back to Godhead now because we are, even though we're in the material world, we're using our senses in Krishna's service. So that's what it means to be in Godhead, that your senses are being fully engaged in Krishna's service, whether in a material body or another body. Our senses are engaged in Krishna's service. So even though Krishna may not protect the material body, he will protect the devotional service that you have performed. So we know that whatever progress we're making in this lifetime, that will continue on, making deposits in our spiritual bank account. So we'll take that with us to the next lifetime and progress onwards with our devotional service. So devotees want to be attached to devotional service. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Archanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanavedanam. Yeah. It's not like we have a Christian's concept that when we die we're going to go to heaven. Devotees are interested in devotional service. That's what we want to get attached to. And of course there will being varying degrees of intensity of that as we progress. Like I know Tamal Krishna Maharaj would say that Srila Prabhupada, because he was a Paramahamsa, pure devotee, he could interchange his consciousness between this dimension we're in now and then the transcendent realm as well. He could interchange at will because his devotional service was at such a point where he was not bound anymore by the three modes of material nature. So, yeah, devotees are attached to devotional service. Krishna Kirtan, Prabhu? Yeah, yep.
And just a couple of examples come to mind, just basically a question that you asked. One is what happened a few years ago. We're very fortunate here in Australia that we can freely go out and chant Hare Krishna. Those perform these activities in very dangerous places. There was a same camp hiding in one of those African countries where they're pulled up by soldiers and they separated Mataji from the men, and they were going to shoot all the men and take the ladies. You know? And one lady, she stood in front of the men to protect her, and she was shot dead. So you would think, well, that's pretty, horrible. We can understand through the transcendental vision that she would immediately enter the eternal pastimes of the world, because she was out saying it. Another example is not seeing what's beyond the immediate suffering is in Srimad Bhagavatam. You have Prithvi Maharaj and his wife Archie when they retire to the forest, which is run across, which is very austere, and eventually Prithvi Maharaj died, and this old lady's in the forest. She had to, pile the wood and burn her husband, which is, you could say it's a very, not only that, she entered the fire. So from the external point of view, you would think that's quite horrific. But if you read the description of Bhagavatam, it's described the wise demigod were watching her. And as she entered the fire, simultaneously she was taken away by an aeroplane. So as the body was walking in, actually the soul was revealed its way to the spiritual. And that's what the demigods could see. In actuality, she was already in the spiritual world. So sometimes the immediate bodily suffering doesn't equate the circumstances for the soul, which you can't see without material eyes. So it's all good in other words.
I don't know if anyone here knows Param Baba. It used to be Param Satya. Any of you familiar with her? yeah, she just left her body in New Zealand with cancer, and she was one of the devotees that sort of helped preach to me back in the sort of mid-1990s. She was quite instrumental in me sort of taking up the path of Krishna consciousness. So yeah, she'd been struggling with cancer, and they were trying to treat it naturally without having to go through the chemotherapy process. And then she left her body maybe a few days ago, and her husband Sita Patti was with her when she was leaving. It was a bit unexpected when she was going to leave, but he was explaining how he was looking at her, and the life hairs were slightly disturbed, and then he was saying to her, oh, look at me, and then he was saying, oh, look, I appreciate all the service that you've done for us, and you know, I said I'll be your husband in the next lifetime as well, words to that effect. And then he explained that at that point when he said that, she sort of left the body, and then he was like, oh, she's left, and saying, oh, param, and then she came back into the body again, and then I think he's saying she looked up at him and then smiled, this beautiful smile. If you've seen Param, such a smile, he's got a really amazing smile, and she smiled at him, and then should have like winked or raised her eyebrows, and then she left her body again. And he was saying, oh, you're a mystic yogi, because it's materially doesn't make any sense. But for devotees, it's a different experience when we leave our bodies. I think Prabhupada gives the example of like the cat who has the mouse in its mouth. That the mouse is feeling terrified, the cat's going to kill it. Whereas the kitten is being carried by the cat. It's a different experience. Even though it's in the mouth of the cat, it's feeling sheltered and fine. So it's the same for devotees. The death experience for devotees is very, very different, because we're absorbed in Krishna's internal potency. So it's a very, very different experience. The devotees aren't feeling fear and anxiety and all these things. Devotees are feeling shelter of the Lord. So that's what we're training ourselves for now, is that point of death. Yam yam bhavi smarambhavam, that whatever state of consciousness we leave our bodies in, we attain that state without fail. So we're becoming absorbed in devotional service and remembering Krishna's pastimes and his leelas and his qualities and his form and his devotees who we're hearing about today. So that's where we're absorbing our consciousness with. So at the time of death, these are our contemplations. But anyway, we should stop. It's getting late. So thank you all for listening. All Guru Srila Prabhupada, Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai.